Dalton, Riley, motherfucking Wolves and Wagers. We had round one of the fantasy playoffs. We're going to talk about the guys who are a lot on the winning roster. That didn't make any sense, but a lot of them on the winning roster, and then a lot of them that were probably on the losing side of things. Rye, I'll kick it over to you.
I'll start on a high note. I'm most likely going to lose this week. I need about 36 points from JSN tonight, so I'm kind of penciling that in as an L. But one guy who did everything possible to try and get me the win was Ty Chandler, 24.7 points, had one touchdown, probably should have had two. He gets them down to the 1 yard line, and they don't give it to him. Wasn't too happy about that, but still, 24.7 points for Ty Chandler as my RB2. Gotta love that.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to the obvious one. CMC having 41.7 in our league. That's full PPR. More than likely, you're moving on if you have CMC. Now, in our league,
Dogfight.
it's coming down to the wire with some two nasty receivers in the matchup with the Eagles and the Seahawks. But CMC, I mean, 3 tuds, absolutely nasty, and I would be pissed if I went against them. But who's kind of your next guy on your winning roster?
Well, I'll stick with the running back theme that we got going here. James Cook, 36.1 full PPR points. It should have had another touchdown on top of it, too. He would have had a 40-point week if he didn't drop that pass. But still, at the end of the day, James Cook putting up 36.1, probably looking like an RB2 in most leagues. That's going to get you to move on. You can't complain about that at all if you're a James Cook owner.
Yeah, and then you can also mention Lat Murray, stole one of those goal line touches. You're talking about James Cook having close to a 50 piece, and he was unbelievable.
Yep.
And outside of him, the game was pretty brutal to watch. The Cowboys were atrocious, and I'm sure, we can kind of touch on a couple of them. I know the late drive helped, but yeah, James Cook was a tough one. And then kind of an under the radar one that maybe was starting like super flex leagues. Baker Mayfield almost had a 30 piece. There was a lot of quarterbacks that you could have played this week. I think Easton Stick still ended up with a decent day. I picked up Brandon Browning, who had a decent day. But Baker Mayfield, 4 passing tuds, lit up the Green Bay Packers. I had to give him a little shout out, which is surprising me, but yeah, almost a 30 piece, right?
Yeah, Baker as a whole, I'm happy for him because it looks like he's kind of rejuvenated his career a little bit to be a starting quarterback going forward. I don't know if that'll still be with Tampa or what it will be, but by now I thought Kyle Trask would be under center. I thought they'd go with the younger guy at some point. I understand them making the move to start Baker at the beginning of the season, but I thought Trask would take over at some point, but Baker's showing him, giving him reason to keep riding with him. So I didn't have that penciled in for round one. Baker putting up 4 tuds, but probably another league winner. I'll stick on the winners here before we talk about some losers. Sam Laporta found pay dirt 3 times. In our league, he was taken in the last round. What a season for him as a whole. Maybe a little boomer bust with him a little bit, but he's still going to get you the rock a few times, and he's going to put up no less than 10 points, it seems, every week, but 28.6 this week.
Yeah, and the Lions looked like a really, really good football team. The Broncos were an absolute disaster. I think when it comes down to it, Kyren Williams did exactly what everybody projected him to do, and that was with 2 fumbles.
Yep.
So he was on pace to absolutely, I think, have a 40-point game and probably would have had 200 yards rushing if it wasn't for that. And he was a guy going into that matchup against that defense. He kind of had a feeling that he was going to eat. And then one more guy I want to touch on. And you went against both these guys, right? Rashee Rice. He's been wide receiver 3 now over this late stretch. And that's what I call a league winner. He got a lot of teams into the playoffs. And then round 1 gets people to win some dough in our league, because if you win the first round, you get money back. So those are 2 guys I wanted to touch on. Was there any other winners that you got, right?
Yeah, my last 2, I had Rashee Rice, so you touched on him absolutely, 24.1 for him. My last 2 are a couple commies. Curtis Samuel, pay dirt 2 times, 21.1. And then Terry McLaurin, 26.1. I mean, that offense has been hit or miss. I don't know what their future looks like with Howell. I thought he was going to for sure be the guy going forward. These last couple weeks haven't been great, but as far as a fantasy standpoint, two of his playmakers put up big numbers in a first round of this week. So you want to start with the losers though?
Yeah, I think if you had Derrick Henry on your roster,
9 yards.
I think he had 20 touches. I'm almost positive he had 20 touches, and he had 9 yards. That's just sad because Derrick Henry won championships for almost half a decade for a lot of teams, especially that 1 year. But I think his time is starting to come to an end, and I think this is a prime example of that, right?
On the other side of the coin, a young running back who I thought was going to be unleashed. I traded for him. I thought he was going to be a league winner for me. I'm projecting him as a first-round pick next year. Bijan Robinson. Couldn't even get me a point. I mean, I might as well have started Gus Edwards. Gus had a touchdown, but 0.4 fantasy points just is not going to cut it in my RB1 spot. And I'm sure he screwed over a lot of teams like mine this week.
Yeah, that, and then the game that he played like 2 snaps.
Yep.
I just can't get a read. I just cannot get a read. The guy is one of the best running back talents to come out of the draft since Saquon Barkley. You know, I mean, he's that legit. And now the Falcons, I have a tough time watching them. I didn't watch any of that game. But when I saw what he finished with, I was absolutely shocked. And another guy that I was absolutely shocked about, and another young kind of star running back in a horrible offense, Breece Hall, 2.8 points. He was traded in our league for James Cook, and our deadline was late in our league compared to a lot of leagues, and I enjoy that because, you know, there's something about making late season trades that affect the playoffs, but this one was huge. James Cook, 36, Breece Hall, 2.8. That's an unbelievable difference. Breece Hall is a loser on a lot of rosters this week, right?
Yeah, I'm going to keep going with the running backs here. There's a lot of them. One that's maybe not his fault entirely because his quarterback got hurt, but Saquon Barkley just been tough for him all year long. I mean, they just absolutely key in on him. 5.7 points, and I'm sure he's still the RB1 on a lot of rosters. So thankfully, I was going up against him this week. So if that's my dying hope for JSN to go for 36 points, is the fact that Saquon didn't even get 6 points. But I'm sure that screwed over a lot of teams this year. And I'll even hop into another one. Najee Harris, 1.3 points. Shout out to Birch if you're watching this video. But he texted me before the first round of the playoffs, and he said, Najee Harris or Jacoby Myers? And I said, man, it's going to be tough, but I guess I lean Najee because they give up a lot of rushing yards. Sure enough, Najee goes for 1.3 points, and Jacoby Myers finishes with 2 touchdowns, one of them being a passing touch. Just you can't make that up.
Yeah, and a couple other guys, another running back, Deonta Foreman was started in our league. He had negative 0.6 points. That's tough. And Dalton Kincaid did outdo Deonta Foreman if you had him in your roster. He thought the gloves were the issue. Well, he ended with 0 receptions and 0 yards. And I'm sure he was started in a lot of leagues. Mark Andrews
Absolutely
goes down with injury. And you just look at the tight end, you know, every year you look at the tight ends and you're like, geez, after a couple names, I'm not drafting anybody till the 9th round. So Dalton Kincaid was probably started. I know Dawson Knox was planning on coming back around this playoff time, and we had somebody mention that, you know, in our league. Hey, watch out for Dawson Knox come playoff time. Dalton Kincaid with a bagel, right?
Yeah, I'll hop to another tight end, a guy I traded Stephon Diggs for. Broke up my stack because I have Josh Allen on my roster, but Diggs was struggling. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go get Travis Kelce because this is when he was struggling as well a little bit. And I said, the Chiefs need to start winning some ball games because they weren't winning a ton of games. And I said, he's going to rely on his go-to target. I know he's 34 years old, but 7.8 points just isn't going to get it done. And also the biggest thing was the drop touchdown. Like Mahomes threw it up there for him. All he had to do was snag it. I know you're about to take a hit, but that's why you get paid the big bucks. You know, you get paid all that money. And he's a veteran, but you got to come down with that. So finishing with 7.8 isn't going to quite get it done after I give up Stephon Diggs for him.
Yeah, I mean, because Tyler Conklin, at 5.8, so you're looking at a 2.1 difference for the week, and that's just Travis Kelce didn't look like himself. He dropped that touchdown, like you said, but I think he's battling some injuries.
For sure.
And I think the Chiefs kind of realize that and kind of want to keep him as healthy as possible for their playoff push. And it came at the cost of fantasy owners like yourself, right? I mean, that's one of the guys, one of your horses going in the playoffs. You want him to have at least double-digit points. Then the last guy that I'm going to touch on is also on my roster, and that's Ja'Marr Chase. Now, I know he had 4 receptions for 64 yards, but he kind of left the game with the injury. I know that's not his fault, but when you look at a guy like T. Higgins having 22.1, I think at least half of those points should be on Ja'Marr Chase, because you go up against Justin Jefferson, the guy who you said you were hands down the best wide receiver in the league. Won the Biletnikoff Award when you guys were teammates at LSU with Joe Burrow. And Jake Browning showed once again that he is one of the best NFL backup quarterbacks, and Ja'Marr Chase ends with 10.4. I was really hoping that he was going to have one of those weeks that we've seen all too often in his first 3 years, and we just didn't see that, right?
Yeah, I know a lot of that scoring came late when he was out, and that is an even worse look for him. But when your team scores 27 points and you're only finishing with 4 catches for, 60-something yards, that's just not going to cut it. And now, like you said, he does have a backup quarterback, but Browning has been good enough to get them winning games. Like, they're in the playoff mix. So shout out to him, I guess. I know he was kind of hating on our Vikings, and I don't know who he's yelling at, because the people he's yelling at, the ones who cut him, aren't even with the team anymore. So he's kind of preaching to the choir. But the last guy I'll touch on is Austin Ekeler, 7.8 points. That just wasn't a good game in general. Bad game script when you let up 42 first half points. You're not going to be able to get the rock a lot. But he's the guy I stayed away from the start. I actually took Stephon Diggs with the 5th overall pick over Ekeler. Ekeler was on the board. I wanted Tyreek to fall to me. He didn't. He actually went 2nd in our league. And I said, you know what? I'll rather overdraft Stephon Diggs than go get Austin Ekeler. I just wasn't confident in him this year. And all year long, he just hasn't been good. So 7.8 is just not going to get it done as well.
Yeah, and then I'm just going to touch on kind of some unique performances. Jerick McKinnon had a passing touchdown to go along with another touchdown. I'm not shocked that he had 16 points. It was just kind of the way
right,
that he had the 16 points. And then I just remember watching this game for some odd reason for a little stretch. Rachaad White breaking off that touchdown to have a week like he had for a running back, I think was massive, because before that he wasn't really having that good of a game. But then he got that receiving touchdown from Baker Mayfield, who we already touched on. But when it comes down to my ultimate winner of the week, Isaiah Likely, I threw all of my fab on him. He had that tud. He had even a tud last week. So if you were looking for a guy and you were in a must-win situation last week, another great pickup. So he voted well for me. I probably won't be able to see him compete in the rest of the playoffs, but he did everything I wanted and plus some. So shout out to Isaiah Likely, right?
Yeah, I'll even go back to the Travis Kelce situation, because Likely was a guy I had a waiver claim in for, and I was going to get him. That was like as soon as Andrews was hurt. And maybe I even had him on the roster and ended up dropping him. I can't remember what it was, but he was coming to be on my roster. And then I was approached with the Travis Kelce trade, and I went with that. I mean, that just shows you how much that ended up hurting me in the long run. But yeah, Likely looking like a good target with Lamar. Showed flashes last year with Andrews was out as well. So I'm interested to see how they go going forward when Andrews is healthy for next season, because he needs to get more targets, and Lamar throws really well to tight ends. But yeah, absolute league winner this week with his touchdown performance. And one more tight end, the last guy I'll mention in this video, McBride out in Arizona, 20 points. I mean, in this league, it's the same thing as last year when the tight end position it's either you have a guy or you don't. And McBride, nothing against him, but he's not one of the top end guys. And so when you can get 20 from him, that's going to end up winning you a lot of fantasy football games.
Yeah, and then I just keep finding names, guys. So I'm gonna keep going. Two kind of guys. If you had them, you started them. Noah Brown, number one, without
Yep.
CJ. I was thinking, okay, if he gets you 12 out of your flex spot, you're happy. He finds the end zone. Maybe he gets 5 for 60 and a ton. 22.2 in our league. And then how about CEH?
Yep.
You want to talk about
Just saw
throwing
his
it back
stat.
to your LSU days? I mean, I know that play call was fantastic because he had 3 offensive linemen block. It literally looked like a punt return. I don't know if
Yeah,
you watched it,
I
but
did see it.
there was.
Yep.
I mean, me and you, we could have gotten 6 fantasy points on that play, but still, he had a 20-piece. So if you had both of those guys on your roster, 42.3 points, brutal to go against, especially if you had a really high scoring week.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened in our league. I mean, I'm looking at the scoreboard right now. Sorry, JL, but Noah Brown and CEH, like you said, 40 plus points out of the flex spots in our league. That's a tough hill to climb. They're both projected to be at over 160. It's going to be an insane finish. You got AJ Brown going against DK Metcalf, and they're fairly similar for score right now. But yeah, like you said, Noah Brown and CEH, unreal performances. But I'm kind of flipping through here. I don't really see any more that pop out to me. Zamir White, that was a good start by you. You asked me before that Thursday night game, should I go with Zamir White or AJ Dillon? Good thing you ended up going with White because he did find the end zone. But you got anybody else you want to touch on?
Yeah, I just think a couple kind of maybe streamer guys. Tucker Kraft, another tight end rack. I mean, he had most of his points in the first half, but I think he had over 15, which you'll take that all day, every day, especially when TJ Hawkinson has less than that. Tight end 1 on the year. And then I kind of heard his name because Tutu got rocked. I don't know if he got lit up like a Christmas tree, shout out for the holidays. So I knew he wasn't playing. He didn't have a shot at playing. He'll probably play this week. But Demarcus Robinson against the Commanders, I was like, okay, I guess we're going to roll with him. Was able to get that touchdown. So if you did start him based off of that 2-2 news, that kind of paid off well, especially in your flex spot.
Yeah, I kind of, when I saw that name, I was like, who are we starting in this league? But yeah, you're right. It ended up paying off. He found the end zone. But I'm excited to see what happens tonight because there's still a lot to be decided. Like I said, I'm banking on a huge JXN night, which I don't. The Eagles secondary, they don't have Slay. Like it's pretty raw out there. So if DK goes down early or if JSN finds himself open, maybe Drew Lock beats him the rock. But I don't know. But anything else to add before we call this video a wraps?
Yeah, I think really good game. Some big time fantasy pieces. DK and AJ Brown, 2 of them that come to mind against 2 dog shit secondaries. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of fantasy points, a lot of touchdowns. I'm hoping so because that's just good for the game. Nobody wants to see a 3-0 game with a field goal kicked with 4 minutes to go, like we saw in Vegas. But outside of that, stay tuned for some Wolves content. We got some big matchups. Looking to get to 20 wins right end off the episode.
Yeah, nice matchup against Miami tonight. I won't go too deep into the Anthony Edwards news. We'll save that for later, and we don't really want to mention it too much now. But like Dalton said, some absolute awesome Wolves content coming out because they got the Mavs again coming up. But until then, we appreciate you guys as always.